Hey guys, Drifter here. I hope you enjoyed the MW2 PC gameplay while I present to you a video that is philosophical but thankfully not political this time. I'm able to avoid that one, though it is a little bit more boomery, old man yells at cloud meme kind of thing, because I want to talk about old people in technology and how technology is actually making me feel a bit old and cantankerous these days. This video was inspired by some situations that I ran into helping my father set up a new tablet. So one of the things that my father wanted is to actually be able to get the streaming apps and some of the news and sports and stuff that his friends have on their streaming devices. Now he's a little bit old school and analog, cable TV. We grew up with rotary phones, that kind of stuff. And he wanted ESPN Plus and Paramount Plus and Coast to Coast AM and some gambling apps and some other streaming apps and some pretty basic stuff. But unfortunately, my father didn't really understand how to install them. He didn't understand how to find the Google Play Store, or when I guided him there, what the Google Play Store was, how it functions, or really just fundamentally what an app is. He didn't understand why his credit card didn't work, because I was using it remotely here in Texas to try to sign up for various services because the numbers were a little bit overwhelming, and then there was an issue with it being out of state and getting pinged for fraud, so we called tech support. And it's easy. In order to remove this and add me as an authorized user at the account, all my dad has to do is download and install some app, like some Visa app or whatever, and make an account. And then once he's made an account, they'll send a request, and then he can take pictures and they'll verify within so many hours. And this is very overwhelming for a person that really doesn't understand what apps do, and also a person that doesn't understand how the camera works very well. I had my dad take pictures and they came back kind of blurry and off center because he doesn't quite get it. And this isn't a session of me dicking on my father or making fun of him for not knowing how to use his tablet. As a matter of fact, the frustrations that he feels, I also feel, albeit at a different scale. And for the first time in quite some time, instead of being frustrated and angry about helping, I actually feel a real deep sense of empathy and desire to help remedy this situation, because he comes from an era of your buttons do things. So, our screen right now, it's click, you touch. You're essentially just touching GUI or software buttons that are made, and not the physical buttons like on the keyboard. He comes from an era to where if you wanted to restart the device, you hit delete and then backspace really quickly, or you punch in a couple of things on the calculator or flip the button on the phone. So when it comes to how to fix problems, my dad always asks, well, what buttons do I hit to fix this? He's like, I've got 3 buttons on my phone, and when I hit them, it's volume up or down or turns off. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, that's the only buttons. And he's like, how could you make a device that's only got 3 buttons? And you have to explain that the buttons are on the screen. And well, he's like, yeah, they were, but they move all around, and every time there's an update, it changes a little bit. Why do they change these things? And these are difficult questions to answer to a person who's usually thinking about a physical locked piece of technology that kind of does a thing. And it actually reminds me a little bit of explaining the internet to my grandfather. Now, my grandfather was blind, so he couldn't see it, but he was a bit of a thinker. He had a lot of time to think while being blind. And for the longest time, he kind of imagined the internet as this gigantic library of things, organized a little bit more like Wikipedia, if you will. In his mind, when you connected to the internet, you open into the library, and the search engine is just like a little assistant. You type in the thing, and it's all perfectly categorized, and they'll take you right there. And he would give me requests like, I want a list of all movies released in 1942, and just kind of things like this. And it took a number of attempts to explain that the internet is a series of networked computers, and it's organized however the person on the other end of that wants to organize it, which means there's a million different ways of organization. So the only way to really look for anything is to rely on the search tools, or to be prepared to dig around and read a little bit. And this kind of took a long time, but did eventually sink in. And I can kind of see how that would feel to an older person who's trying to find things, and every site and everything and every button looks kind of different. Another problem that we're going to talk about a little bit later in my boomer moments section is, my parents asking, hey, I want this service. We'll pick on Netflix. Is there a way I can sign up for Netflix and pay via check? Is there a paper they can mail me? And I don't know about Netflix in particular, but by and large, no. A lot of times when you sign up for new services these days, it has to go through an app or a website or something. Even basic utility services, rent pay, tons and tons of things have to go through some portal or some kind of app, and there's really not much of a way around it, or if there is, it's an extremely slow way that somebody might have barely functioning just for the very elderly. Or how do I answer questions like when my dad's phone pops up some kind of warnings about cookies, accept or reject, or anonymous data sharing, or what info do you want to let Google have about you so that it can better serve ads? Because this is an extremely complex thing. I can understand it vaguely, I can understand the ramifications of some of it and have opinions about it, but I don't understand it at the same way like a Google engineer or a mathematician or programmer would. And the only thing I can say is that, well, yeah, it spies on you. Well, parents don't want that, so they'll hit no, 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 and then nothing works. And I'm like, well, if it doesn't spy on you, it doesn't work. And then there's a conflict with that. Or, hey, I've seen my friend put his tablet on the TV, because you can cast the TV or like plug in with, HDMI or whatever. How do I do that? Can I put this on my old square TV? Like, one of those old, like, picture cathode ray tubes ones? God have mercy on my soul. But each one of these questions is a fairly legitimate one from his point of view, and I can empathize. I'm not here to make fun of the elderly and say that they can't or shouldn't compute or that they're dumb, but I can seriously empathize because the world around us has changed radically in the last decade. If I went back to 2012, there was way more things I could do with paper, way more things I could do with checks, way less technology, way more buttons, less social media, less complicated algorithms. Just in the last 10 years, the complexity of technology has exploded to a point where I struggle with it, which we'll talk about very soon. But I couldn't imagine what it would be like coming from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Even people that were into computers in the 80s really struggle with all the bizarre stuff that we have now. So I can empathize. And I want to talk about some of the things that I personally have struggled with technology outside of errors and, gremlins and little bugs that I have to fix. And the number one at the absolute top of my list is subscription service everything. Every single thing that I buy has a subscription service. Every piece of software, every video game, that's essentially what a battle pass is. A lot of the pieces of hardware, or if I do something like if I buy a new mouse from some company or whatever, it'll want me to install the company's proprietary hardware for better updates and control of the mouse, and then it'll pop up if I want to pay for premium something in there. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's smart refrigerators, smart toasters. I bought a treadmill recently so I could do physical therapy, and the device would not even turn on unless I signed up for a $30 a month subscription. I don't want that. I don't want to subscribe to everything. I want some technology to just be analog and simple. Some things don't need a monthly bill. Some things don't need that long-term revenue. Some things, like a blender, it just needs to blend my food. It doesn't need to have like an always-on kind of thing that I have to connect to and verify through the internet and scan a QR code or whatever. Which leads me to the next thing. A lot of times I have to use an app to turn on a device. I get a new device and it'll turn on, and oftentimes it won't do very much unless I also install an app on my phone and give it permission to do like basically everything and spy on me. And that's for every little piece of technology I use. Every little thing that I even consider plugging in wants to be turned on with an app on and verified on some kind of phone somewhere. On top of that, many times, as we mentioned before, an app is the only way to pay a bill or do a thing. If you're going to sign up for a new service, like let's say even you just want a new phone to get the internet, you're probably going to have to use some kind of app from the company to manage your bill pay software. If you want to do, I can't even imagine, like literally anything. My entire life is probably contained in about 20 or 30 different little apps, and there aren't a lot of other options. So if you're older and you're unfamiliar with apps and don't necessarily know how they work or can't think so clearly, you're pretty much completely cut out of society. You're removed from existing as far as most people are concerned. And that's why I don't get mad at homeless people that have iPhones, because they need those like to get by, to do hardly anything. You have like phone scan check-ins at various places. It's crazy. And speaking of checking in, another totally boomer pet peeve of mine is when I download an app to do a thing and I absolutely have to sign in with Facebook or Google. There's no email password, there's no username, or sometimes it's sign in with Twitter or some other service. And that's terrible because it usually requires that I link my account to that app, and it'll auto generate the account and sign in, and it'll auto give permissions to a ton of stuff on Google. And I'm in a unique position where my Google account here on this verified YouTube channel is very important to me, and I link very few things to it, and I want to have very few opportunities for apps to do weird things to my account. And I don't have Facebook. I'm banned from Facebook. So sometimes I'm just totally locked out of using the apps that I probably didn't want to use to begin with because it doesn't have a basic username and email sign-in. Though I do admit in the last couple of years, that's become a little bit more common and there's less people signing in with Google or Facebook. Another thing that I struggle with is training algorithms to do certain things. And this is very particular when it comes to my social media and the things I watch on YouTube and Netflix and whatever. Algorithms will essentially serve you increasingly extreme content to take you out to the emotional ends of what you're willing to handle because you're very primed for advertising in those sort of susceptible states. So if I make the mistake and I watch one news video on YouTube, just one, or heaven forbid, if I watch one of those like political opinion videos, my timeline just explodes full of the most extreme stuff that you can imagine, incel things, left, right, whatever. And I can literally see it trying to push me down this more extreme path. So I have to clear things out of my history, I have to reset browsing history, use the dislike and blah, blah, blah. And I literally have to train the algorithm like it's a child or a servant or something to bring me the things I want and not to flood me in with a ton of things that are terrible for my mind. And this is something that's frustrating to me, but I couldn't imagine somebody that's 50 to maybe 75 years old that couldn't really spell the word algorithm, much less understand what it does, having the forethought to consider what you're being primed for and to manage this. On top of that, it's sometimes getting harder to detect sneaky ads. Some of them are very well designed to look like regular parts of the website. Maybe it's a sign of my age. I've gotten got a time or two. Identifying bots and scams gets increasingly tricky. They get better every time. I mean, there's like some old garbage of like Nigerian princes, but some of them are a little bit more sophisticated these days. And sometimes you only have to click one bad link and it's like, GG, you're done, you know? The other thing is that you have to have internet for a lot of this to work. If you don't have internet, the device won't function. And I don't mean that, then obviously a smartphone won't function, right? But there's so many smart devices like refrigerators and blenders and whatever, to where if you don't have internet to verify your real purchase or whatever, it just doesn't work. Or also like the Adobe suite, tons of these programs, the majority of games these days, even I totally get like, okay, Warzone is a multiplayer game, but the majority of these games will not boot, or at very least will not let you play without internet connection. So there's no offline mode. If my internet goes down, I can't just go play single player or test or practice. I'm kind of stuck there. So these are the things that I've personally been struggling with. And I consider myself a person who's a little above average with handling technology, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more well-read. I'm not a genius. I don't have some galaxy brain, but I'm ahead of the curve on a lot of things. And I really struggle sometimes. So when I hear my dad having these struggles, I can really empathize with his pain. And I also wonder why this is happening. And I guess this is perhaps the only point of this entire video near the end of the rant. Why is the world this crazy? Why is everything an app? Why is that? And I think the reason is that tech monopolies are killing almost all innovation outside of monetization. And one of the number one ways to monetize anything is to just take people's data and sell it. There's an insanely huge data resale market and data analytics market and like direct ad serve spyware kind of market. So any company, like I have Allstate Insurance, for example, and they push me constantly to install this DriveWise safety app, whatever, so that it can spy on me 24/7 and determine if I'm totally worthy of that savings. And the reason they do that isn't so that they can justify giving me 5% off. It's so that they can sell that data for God only knows how much money to God only knows who. And they just turn more profit that way. That's why every company has their own proprietary app. their own sign-in, their own service, their own method of working. That's why every product is locked behind some sort of activation or paywall or subscription service, because the tech monopolies of this country have decided that instead of innovating technology, they're going to innovate in monetization and find new ways to monetize everything. And I think it makes everybody's life worse. It kind of reminds me of a Carl Sagan quote, and I'll say quote in air quotes here because I'm actually going to paraphrase him. I think if you look this up on YouTube, it's called The Demon Haunted World, and it's a little audio recording of Carl Sagan talking about a future where science is miraculous, it's advanced, it can do almost anything, it can answer almost any question, a little beautiful hippy-dippy little Star Trek utopian future, but one that is ultimately so complex, very few, if any, people understand how any of the things are working, and more importantly, those people who are in power don't understand how any of this works, which couldn't be more true of our very elderly representatives, at least at the, well, let's be honest, pretty much every level from state to federal in the United States, they're all very old. They understand very few of these things. The majority of them probably still operate in a mindset that, like my father does, of what buttons do I hit to fix this? Can I just turn it on and off again, without any problems? And of course, they're not going to be able to stop tech monopolies from doing increasingly crazy things. They're not going to stop people from having to suffer through bad customer experiences or having good customer protections because they don't understand what's going on. Just like Carl Sagan said, the technology to them is miraculous. It's amazing. It changes the world, but it's so complex. They don't know how it operates. So they don't know how to make it better or worse or even just keep it going. It's like, I don't know, just let them do whatever they want. And the problems get worse. So that's a little bit of a rant for me. It's just something I've been feeling lately. I just totally felt it when I could feel like my dad's pain trying to set up this device, because I have that same pain when I run into, I need a $30 a month subscription to turn on my treadmill. And the world is only going to get more like that. So I guess I'm going to get more grumpy with it over time. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something useful. And I also hope that you at least got a chuckle out of this old man yells at clouds meme. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.